Hello, everyone. We are going to be looking at a presentation today by me, Shaquita Arnold. Hi. We're going to be talking about transformative learning in higher education. So, for those of you who may not have known, transformative learning, as described by Corley, is learning that changes the way individuals think about themselves and their world, and that involves a shift in their consciousness. So, we're having a type of learning that takes place when something changed the way our minds perceive our life, our frames of reference change, our um, schema changes, the synopsis and the different electric signals in our brains change and build upon this new information when we're experiencing a transformation. The three different people there, yes, those three people, Jack Mesereau, Paul Freire, and Robert Boyd, are three of the main people who have these different versions of transformational learning. The rational transformation, or one that basically deals with a disorienting dilemma taking place, something major happening in your life, and you coming to terms to this new sort of thinking based on critical thinking and different conversations, putting your um, past thoughts and perceptions behind in order for you to take on this new way of thinking. My favorite, and it's a bias, is social transformation because um, it deals with oppressive elements of society being over overthrown through knowledge and through a transformation in your mind in that aspect. So making a social change through this transformation. So I like that one. I like all of them, but I identify with that one. And individuation transformation deals with the psychology of the conscious mind and you having an individual transformation within yourself, dealing with the ego and self for that particular transformation. So as I just displayed, some people are like more prone to one version of transformation. I honestly can see aspects of all of them, but the reason why I relate to social transformation more is because of my life. So you can definitely tell that the transformation that is closest to my heart will also play out in my classroom. So my a thing for me to do would be to learn how to weave elements of all of them into my classroom, which I definitely do think I am doing, even though I'm not dealing with adult learners yet. Um, it's important that we see all perspectives and understand that not all learners are going to benefit from one of those types of transformations. Probably the most or get the most out of it. So we need to make sure we are using elements of all of them. Okay, so the questions that we're dealing with is how does transformative learning best practices show up in higher education today? We're going to look at that article to figure that out. And how do concepts and issues related to transformative learning relate to my future and current work environment? The article that I chose to do was called Don't Stop Inviting Controversial Speakers, Just Prepare Prudently. This is from the Chronicle of Higher Education. And it basically talked about many universities that were hosting these events where controversial speakers like Richard Spencer, who was like the leader of the alt-right movement, were coming into their schools, and some of them went well. Some of those speeches dealing with whatever topics they were talking about, probably those that dealt with race and other sensitive topics. Some go well, and some go completely chaotic and catastrophic. So basically, it talked about some specific events that took place with specific speakers at particular colleges and universities, and which ones worked. Like, what could they do in order to make sure this chaos doesn't happen again? So one of the incidents in particular was this Lucian Wintrick incident. He came to speak at the University of Connecticut, and I actually went to look up the video on my own, and I noticed that some of the issues were there were no moderators. Okay, somebody introduced him, and then that was it. And There were no people there to make sure that, okay, yeah, you have free speech, but there are certain things that we don't, want you to say. Like to just kind of like put a disclaimer out there. Um, and it was very difficult to hear because everybody was always screaming or yelling something. And even though he may have said something that was offensive to me as a person based on my culture, gender, etc., I still wanted to hear what he had to say. And I thought about how what we're learning with these theorists, and mine in particular dealing with transformational learning, how that could have changed this situation. If you want people to have a transformation in their learning, like I want that gentleman that you see in the middle, I want him to have a transformation in his learning. We can't do that if he can't hear my point, if he can't listen to a perspective different than his own, if he cannot have a conversation that leads him to have this aha or this epiphany in his thinking, we can't do that because of how the event was planned. So that was something to learn from that. Okay, so I think I just kind of touched on how this event relates to transformative learning. In a controversial setting, people are forced to reflect on what they know to be truths and what someone else thinks and feels. And I respect what he thinks as a person. His experiences and his life growing up may have led him to believe what he believed. And, there were some thoughts that I had growing up based on where I was or who I was, and we learn. And once we learn, we have to do better. You know better, you do better. So in order to be more anything that makes a person more inclusive or open to other viewpoints, assist in an adult's development, and that's what this event did. It allowed us to, well, it should have allowed people to develop more as a person, but the way it was set up, it didn't allow them to do that. So that's what we learned from that. Okay, so another portion of transformation that we see in this is social transformation. I'm going to read this quote. Freire believes that this transformation can happen when an unveiling or demythologizing the reality of the oppressed through the awakening of their critical consciousness, where they gain the ability to distinguish between social, political, and economic contradictions and learn to act against the oppressive elements of the past. So, the things that were being talked about in many of these speeches made me think about what is the current state of affairs in our nation and how do we overcome that, because some people are actually believing some of the things that they're thinking. And I don't want to go too deep, but if you don't know um, Richard Spencer, for example, he stands out the most to me because of the type of rhetoric he has. He truly believes that there's no equality and that black people and white people should be separate, and that white people they were just the best at oppressing another people, and that, it's too much diversity in the world, and it was just a lot of different things. That's oppressive mindset. And knowing that people feel that way really do take away from freedom in this world, especially if so many people begin to believe that and to hold that dear to them. So we look at social transformation for that reason, in terms of this event, an event similar to this. So my current work environment, I work at a charter school, and I have been working in education since I graduated from college. This is always what I wanted to do, was to teach. And currently, I deal with some coworkers who are still trying to see how society affects the children that they teach. It's clear for me to see it, but some people really don't see it. It's not like a conversation that they have at home over the dinner table, or even something that they've learned during some trainings. They don't really know um, how the world as it has been or currently is now altogether coupled. They don't know how it affects their students and how it affects how they treat their students. Okay, so learning about transformational learning helps me to think about how to encourage and motivate adults to see what we're saying and to think differently about how they interact with the students that they teach. Politics, priorities, and budgets affect the progress that are made here in my current work environment. I know that there are so many things that we could be doing. And it's not that cultural differences or cultural responsiveness or equity is not a priority. I'm sure it's on our list of priorities for our LCAP, etc. However, the speed at which and the force at which they deal with these issues deals with those three things I listed above. And I would like to work in an environment where that's not the super driving force as to whether, this becomes first on the list or last. So I would like to work at a place that has a plan of action to educate community, faculty, and staff on societal issues and tackle the issues that come about as a result. Short-term goals and long-term goals that they see through, and make sure that efficient and reliable people are put over that process to ensure that it gets handled properly. Um, I also want to work in an environment where there are concentrated efforts planned in advance and everybody understands what they need to do and to respect boundaries, etc. Like for instance, a lot of people are saying it's free speech, we can say what we want to say, but would you walk into a church using profanity and talking about something completely non-religious or um, I can't think of the word right now. It's eluding me. But would you do that in a church? You have free speech anywhere, but we have to know boundaries. And I want somebody to stand up for boundaries. You got to you should be able to say your thoughts, and there should also be some consideration and respect for people where you are. All right, well, that is the end of my presentation, and sorry that we could not all be here at the same time, but if you have any questions, I would love to answer them, and I thank you for watching my presentation. Thank you. Here are my references.